What does a little girl do when her mirror is shattered, when the woman who's supposed to teach her how to love herself is too busy chasing shadows of affection in strangers' eyes? Welcome back from abuse to abundance. I'm your host, Tiffany Carter, and this is Chapter 2, The Prestigious Alcoholic. Today, we're peeling back another layer of the perfect facade, but we're not looking at the house anymore. We're looking at the woman who taught me my first lessons about love and worth and hunger. My mother, the eternal performer in a one-woman show where male attention was the only standing ovation that mattered, where daughters were supposed to be acts at best, stagehands at worst. This isn't just another story about maternal wounds or daddy issues. This is about the DNA of desperation, how we inherently fought the hunger for validation, how we learn to measure our worth in whistles and sideways glances, how we become experts at shape-shifting and people-pleasing before we even learn to write our own names. If you've ever caught yourself disappearing to make someone else shine, if you ever felt like love was a performance you couldn't quite nail, if you're still trying to unlearn the lessons that taught you that you weren't enough, this chapter's for you. Because sometimes understanding where our broken pieces came from is the first step to putting ourselves back together again. As always, if you or someone you know needs support, the RAINN National Sexual Assault Hotline is available 24/7 at 1-800-656-HOPE. You can swipe up and access it in the show notes. If you are one of our millions of listeners around the world, please Google a local support hotline to be able to get help, because help is right there for you in a variety of ways, and you don't need to be in this alone. If you're tired of hearing the same old basic mindset and motivational fluff talk, you've come to the right show. Welcome to Project Me with Tiffany Carter, the podcast where we dish on everything from managing that crazy brain of yours to manifesting abundance to my straightforward, actionable steps that will make you major money online. Now, I'm not your typical multimillionaire entrepreneur. It takes a small village to keep my anxiety and depression in check. I'm inherently disorganized with an intense obsession with office supplies. Your girl here is a digital marketing content expert who's generated over $200 million in sales. I promise by tuning in twice a week, you will get a much needed refreshing dose of truth, clarity, and cash-making advice. Now let's get to it. In less than 2 days, my biggest holiday sale of all time is launching. You have got to be on my Secret Posse Weekly Digest free email community list in order to get first dibs. There are 2 things that you have been asking for literally for several years now that we have been working on all year to create for you that are special gifts and bonuses for our biggest sale yet. And I do not want you to miss this. So go to projectmewithtiffany.com/secret posse. Make sure you set a phone alarm for November 20th, which is Wednesday. I would set it for like 7 a.m. in whatever time zone you're in. Set it first thing in the morning. Make sure you go check your email so that you can get in here. There is going to be a cap on only 33 people can get this. And keep in mind how many people listen to this show, the tens of thousands of people in our email community, plus the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that are on my various social media channels. And only 33 people are going to get this. And I don't want you to miss out on it. And it is going to shooketh you. I'm very proud of it. I can't wait for you to see it. And before we go into chapter 2, I want to take a moment to say thank you to those of you who took the time to send me emails, to send me DMs, to shout out chapter 1, and to share how much it meant to you. Those of you who subscribed on Project Me TV on YouTube, who commented, who are back and here and watching or listening to chapter 2. Because of you and because of taking that time, I'm putting out chapter 2. And I'm not going to continue to put out chapters unless I see that it's really deeply resonating and helping and impacting because that's the whole point of this. And if it's not, it's okay. I will keep this for myself in private and something that I just share with select people. But if you really are finding this so helpful, taking the time to share this with someone who you think is another survivor, who you know is another survivor, who you feel it will resonate for them, someone who even sees that it is on your social media channel and decides to listen. This time of year is extra difficult for people who grew up in dysfunctional households, who are trauma survivors and gone through a lot of stuff. It brings up all sorts of things. And this is also why I'm sure I was energetically being led to put this out at this time of year. And so trust in whomever you need to share it with and whomever's name is coming up for you to pass this episode on to. Know that there's a reason, and whether they thank you for it or not, it's helping them. And it really is helping me. Even though a lot of your stories are filled with so much pain, I can hold space for this. And I want you to know each and every one of your messages has been read. And I might not be able to get back to all of you because that would be an insane responsibility. But I want you to know that I'm holding space for you and we're in this together. And I love you so much. And thank you for supporting me in doing the most wildly vulnerable, terrifying, and empowering thing that I've ever done in my life. Like most people who have lived through lots of adversity, lots of pain, lots of trauma and dysfunction, there's missing chunks of time in childhood. There's foggy memories, faint memories. I've met many people who have almost no memories of childhood. And truly, I wish I could erase a lot of the things that I remember. And I would say the next period of time that I can remember in my childhood is when I realized for absolute certainty that I was never going to be enough for my mother. It didn't matter how good of a girl I was, how pretty I was, how much I complied, how sweet I was, how adoring I was, how much I anticipated her every single need, how much I morphed into whatever she needed to be at any given time, at any given moment. There was nothing that was going to trump the drug of male attention for her. And this remains true to this very point in time, as my mother's 82 years old now. And not one thing has changed. The attention of a male, even if the attention of a male is fake, is fraudulent, even if the man is scamming her and using that to get something from her, it didn't matter. All that mattered was this drug. So while my mother is not a substance addict, she may as well be, to the drug of oxytocin, to the drug of external validation from people, from places, from things. Her top two men, number two was her anorexia, or I should say, is her anorexia, and how many people fed into that and how society fed into that by constantly reinforcing and giving her what she wanted, by calling her skinny everywhere we went at all times. And regular reoccurring memories I have are of going through the rich person mall, because I lived in a rich person area. And I loved going through this mall. Who doesn't love a great mall, especially back then when malls were the vibe? And my mom loved going shopping, loved razzle dazzling and all the fashion and the outfits, which my mom loved going shopping with all the fashion and all the outfits, which is part of what made her so magnetizing, is that she was so put together and everyone would fawn over her in the shops because she had a model's figure. How do you stay so skinny? She would ask, do you have an extra, extra small? Do you happen to have a 00? And the Staff in the stores would gasp, especially growing up in the Midwest. This wasn't Los Angeles where a 00 was the norm. This is an area where probably the norm is more of a size 12, even a 14. And people would run around. They would pull the sample sizes of garments for her and save them for her. And they would call her when new things came in and they pulled them for her because she was the only person who could possibly fit in them. And I remember how it was such a scene going to these shops in the mall. And I felt like I was with a celebrity with how much attention everyone gave her. And it was also very apparent of how little I got. I got the seconds, I got the crumbs, I got the attention by proxy. But I even knew at that young of age, I would even say as early as about fourth grade, around 10 years old, I knew that these people were just kissing her ass because they were making a ton of money off her. And her ego was lapping it up like someone who just can't get enough sugar and they're handing her sugar. She loved it. And then she would try on the outfits and come out of the dressing room for everyone to see and everyone to gush. And I was required to gush as well. And truly, there was nothing that didn't look amazing on this woman because she really was that like sample size. She was what society has taught us is the epitome of a perfect body, of a movie star body. In fact, that's what people would say. You should be a movie star. And she loved that. It grew tiring and old to me. I did like the attention that we got. I did kind of like the feeling of, knowing I was with someone who was very well known and we would get stopped all the time and we would get stares because even though this was an affluent area and there were other fashionable women, not this kind of fashion. This is like Fifth Avenue in Manhattan fashion. This is Paris fashion. This stood out. And I did kind of like that I knew we were different on one hand. On the other hand, it got old. It got tiring. I just wanted to hide sometimes. I just wanted my mom to myself. I just wanted to be enough. I just wanted actually it to be about me sometimes. And she would take me to stores, as long as I was playing the part that I was supposed to play of the good daughter, of the perfect daughter, of the adoring daughter. As long as I did all of that, I was taken to, my kind of favorite stores and allowed to get all sorts of outfits. And I did like that. And it did make me feel very special. But I also, at the same time, I even knew at that young of age, I would have rather not had any of those clothes or those things. I would have rather had my mom's attention and to have been enough for her. Men would stop her when we would go and have lunch while we were shopping. Men would send over a glass of wine. They would come by and drop their business card. And this was constant. And I saw it as a good thing when it happened because of my mom's reaction. She was high. And as long as it happened, she was high and she was happy because she got her fix, she got her drug. And so I wanted this to happen, even though it made me uncomfortable and like the audacity of some of these men coming over when she's sitting across from her young daughter and that they even thought it was appropriate to hit on her at this level in front of me is insane. And at the same time, I also had a sense of relief in my body. She has her fix. She has her thing. And there was this one restaurant we would always go to in the mall. I wish I remembered the name of it. I still would probably really like it. My mom loved dining out a lot. I love dining out. Just she loved it for different reasons. It certainly wasn't for the food because this woman didn't eat. But she did, like most what most good anorexics would do. And she would order the salad with the dressing on the side, with the chicken on top, and move shit around on her plate and never really even use the dressing and pick at it, but move stuff around just enough where it looked like she actually ate the food. I was only allowed to eat certain things. And I knew at 10 years old, I would say, as far as my memory serves me, I knew what was permitted on the menu for me to order and what was off limits. I certainly was never allowed to order off a kid's menu. In fact, I never ordered off a kid's menu. And when I would be with friends, and if I would go out with friends and their parents, and I remember feeling very confused when I would go to order off the adults menu and they would redirect me to the kids menu. I always thought it was weird. And I remember saying to my mom something about it when I came home from spending time with friends and their parents. And she would say it was because they're cheap. And that's why they want you to order off the kids menu, and that they don't see you as a polished adult and more of a grown up. And so I was like, oh, I looked at it like it was a bad thing. And that's when I also learned the other game and the other role that I had to play. I got highly rewarded when I would come back, whether it was from my father's house, as my parents were divorced when I was 4. My father was her second husband. Her first husband is a story that I don't even think warrants a chapter because it was not when I was alive, but she did marry a man that she found out was gay on her wedding night, and they had some kind of an arrangement to play a role. I think he paid off her remaining college tuition as long as she played the part of the wife for a certain number of years. There was some sort of game there that I'll never have the full story on because narcissists never actually tell you the full truth. So while I'm sharing these chapters with you in this story, I've also had to be really discerning of, is this a real story that I can account for? Or is this something she repeatedly told me that could likely be a lie in her narcissism that isn't accurate at all? So I can't vouch for much of that. And therefore, we're not going down that path. But what I learned is I had to, when I came back from spending time with my father, which I was never there overnight, it was only for dinners on Tuesday and then all day Saturday. That's it, which is really kind of fascinating as I grew up and in my adult life now of custody arrangements. I've never heard of custody arrangements so restrictive from a parent who was like an excellent parent in the sense that my dad was a responsible, loving, safe person. And he had very little time with me, but he certainly also didn't try to fight my mom for more, which we'll get into my father stuff in a later episode and how he abandoned me in a different way. But I knew when I came back from spending time with him or at friends' houses, I had one role to play, and that was how terrible it is over there and how much better it is with her and how much better it is at our house, how cheap my friends' parents were, how their house isn't as nice, how they didn't give me enough food, how it wasn't fun, how it was boring, how they're not very smart, how fat the mom is, how my dad is so weird, how he's so cheap. And it took me years to really finesse this role into exactly what she wanted and how she responded. This is when I learned the art of truly being hyper vigilant and watching my mom's responses, the nuances in her responses, her body language to the things I said, and what lit her up and what pissed her off and what didn't get much of a response at all. And I got really good at it. And then I would make up stories. I would have to make up stories about my father. I would make up stories about my friends' parents or circumstances over there because truly, especially when I was with my friends' parents and at my friends' houses, I loved it. I felt loved. We had a great time. It wasn't restrictive. I felt free. I could eat sugar. We could stay up. The mom baked cookies. We did really fun activities. It wasn't as rigid. I felt like, I guess it was more like what one is supposed to feel, a little more childlike, but there was no way I could come home saying that. And she would always ask me, so how was it over there? And it was not going to be the answer of, I had so much fun, mom. I had the best time, da da da. Well, that's what most parents would want to hear, I would think, that their child had. But that is not approved. And if I even gushed on, oh, so and so's parents, they took us to this arcade, or we went over here and, we did this, and I went too far with it, then she would say something really nasty about them. And then the next time I would go to ask to go to their house, it would be denied. So I knew if I wanted to protect myself and be able to keep going over there, I had to play this very complex, nuanced game, which again is one of the many roles that I had to constantly be juggling in that household. There were several years of separation when my mom was single between my father and my mom divorcing when I was 4 and her third husband, the prestigious alcoholic. I know that she left me a lot with my nanny to go on various weekend trips with men that were posed as business trips, to go on countless dates on Friday and Saturday night. She was always booked and busy. And I would get excited when she would come home from one of these because she would always bring me some sort of present, which made me feel like she loved me and she missed me and she was thinking about me, which in reality, when I look back, it was just my reward for not saying a peep and not causing any problem with a nanny and not interrupting her time with her addiction. And her best friend, who I was taught to call Auntie, and I won't say the person's name, and this became a common thing. If it was one of my mom's chosen puppets, and it was one of the closest people to her in that sense, the main person, one of her main people that she was getting supply from, I would have to look at them like they were a family member. And I was an only child. She was an only child. My father's an only child. So I did not have cousins. I did not have aunts or uncles. So this felt fun to me to say that. It made me feel normal because I would hear kids in school talking about their cousin, their auntie, their uncle. And I liked knowing I had someone. These people lasted usually for a several year period, and then they would just mysteriously be gone one day. And this auntie had a son who was, I'm thinking 5 to 6 years older than me. It might even be more than that. It might be 7 and 8. It's a little foggy. And I was taught to refer to him as my cousin, which was also fun to me to be able to do that. And all of that seemed so innocent at the time until it turned dark. And then after she mysteriously disappeared, my auntie, and I learned not to ask questions. It felt like, what you would see in a mafia movie. Don't ask, don't tell. This is when I learned the family secrets. You do not ask questions. You do not question the narcissist. You do not question the authority. You don't question authority figures, period. You shut the fuck up. Because I would ask, where is Auntie? I haven't seen her. When is she coming? And this was not met well, and I knew not to say anything. And soon after that, entered one of my mom's clients that she started dating, and she was enamored by him. And this is one of the men who frequented the parties at the house in which I was the cocktail waitress. He was high up in Walgreens. I can say a little more about him because he is dead now. And he was at a high level, like a vice president level of the liquor division in particular. And like you learned in chapter one, a lot of my clients were in that liquor side of the business. So this is a whale client, as you can imagine. This is a whale store, a whale chain to be able to have access to. And all of a sudden, here's my mother going to box seats at Bears football games. She's getting courtside seats to basketball games. She went to the Olympics. She went to the major like PGA golf tournaments, the Kentucky Derby. It was her dream, was to have this level of status, to be seen and seen. Now, this man certainly didn't have to pay for any of this. He got all of this by way of what he did for a living, but she was so enamored by it. And how she introduced him to me wasn't like what a responsible parent would do. And we need to like slowly introduce you to my daughter. And I don't want to just introduce strange men to my daughter. And we need to make sure there's, compatibility and blah, blah, blah. None of that mattered because this was her drug. All I remember is all of a sudden they were married. I do not think, unless I'm blacked out, that I was ever in the wedding, that there was a wedding to go to. I don't know if they did a courthouse eloping or what occurred. But for whatever reason, my mom had to marry these people. Like her being married meant like that was a part of the supply. Like marriage had to happen. And this guy was all of a sudden in the house. He was in the room next to mine, became his office. It was all redecorated for him with like, the brown leather chairs and the wood paneling. And he got so much attention and so much happening. And it was so weird to me because all of a sudden there was this strange man in my house who was so opposite of my father. And that's the only real male that I had a lot of time with. And my dad was just such a different type of person to begin with. My dad definitely was an avoidant attachment style, for sure on the spectrum, without a doubt. A man of few words. My dad had me at 50 and he looked like a grandfather. I was taught to call him Papa so that it would be socially acceptable at that time, so that people wouldn't be like, I don't know, say as much as they already said, which is, oh, your granddaughter's so cute. Oh, I love that you're having granddad and granddaughter day. And I'd be so mortified because this was my father and I knew how much older he looked than my friends' fathers. And my dad was very chill. That's where I get a lot of my chill personality. And once they were divorced, my dad didn't have the control of my mom making him dye his hair, making him go on runs, making him wear the certain costume and play the part. My dad got to escape that and wasn't having to do any of that anymore. So my dad loved food and loved traveling the world. So my dad had the belly. My dad's hair was white. He wore whatever the hell he wanted and really didn't give a fuck. And so it made him look even older than his age because he wasn't really well put together and put that much effort into his looks. That wasn't of super importance to him. And it was embarrassing for me. I was definitely embarrassed, and my mom taught me to be embarrassed by it because she would constantly say, "Look at your father. He's a ragamuffin. Look at how he's dressed. He's let himself go since he's with me. When he was with me, he was handsome, he was slim, he was this, that, and the other. Look at him now." And it was always majorly nasty. And then, there was some truth to what she said. And so then I had all of these thoughts about my father when I was with him, and they weren't good, even though he was a lovely, loving, safe, calm, sweet, docile man. But I was embarrassed, like when he would ask me where I wanted to go for lunch, I didn't want to go anywhere where I thought we could run into any of my friends. I was I was that embarrassed because she taught me it was embarrassing. And therefore I thought it was like I should be embarrassed by him. And the cool thing about my dad is because he obviously, on one hand, knew who I was living with, he is the one who like took me to McDonald's and took me to Brown's Chicken. Like I hadn't had anything like that. And not like those foods are good for you, but it is good for a kid to be able to, have some foods like that. And I knew I had to lie about that when I came home. And what that taught me is that there are certain foods that are bad, and they're so bad you have to lie about it. They're so bad that they have to be kept a secret. And I also knew when I came back from spending time with him that I had to talk shit about my dad, and it better be good. And I didn't always have stuff to come up with, so I would have to make up stuff about my dad in order to appease her. And if I didn't do that, then she would berate my dad and I would have to listen to it. So it was better for me to have the entire act down that I really didn't want to see my father and I didn't want to go. And the only reason I'm going is because we have to, because of, the court custody thing. And I just wanted to stay with my mother. And then I started to believe what I was saying because that's what she taught me. So I started really not wanting to go. And that lasted all through high school, where you say something enough and you're gaslit enough into this, you start believing it. And the truth is, I would do anything to have time with my father today, who's no longer with us, who died before my 25th birthday. And she took that from me because I would be over there, and the whole time in my head, I'd be like, oh, I don't want to go. I don't want to be here. It's so boring. It's so this, because that's what she wanted me to believe. And therefore I believed it. And I carried a lot of guilt like that about that for a long time. So having this personality of her third husband in the house, who was much younger, he had the tan, he had the outfits, he had kind of a swagger, he had that extroverted personality, a mover and a shaker, kind of more of like a salesman type personality. It was like so bizarre to me because I just wasn't used to that. And it was such a drastic difference. And it always felt so weird. And pretty soon thereafter that, we would find this guy absolutely comatose, wasted, passed out on the couch in his office. He was definitely drunk enough to where I got in a lot of trouble for emptying out bottles of alcohol from the upstairs bar and gotten a crap ton of trouble for it. So I was obviously trying to manage it because I didn't like what was going on there. And I don't remember him being particularly like mean to me. I don't remember him doing anything inappropriate to me. What I was mad at was the chaos that was going on as a result, and that he took my mom away from me. He was the drug to my mom, and I wanted that gone. And that he had a drug that he was addicted to, alcohol, that was also insanely disruptive, where there would be screaming, there would be all sorts of drama in the house. Then flash forward, all of a sudden, these kids that he had from another marriage, there were like two adopted kids. One was so much older than me and did not live with us, but the other kid was a girl who was in high school. She was 16, and they moved her into the house. And understandably, she was a disaster, being obviously a product and being a daughter of an alcoholic. And I'm sure there was trauma from her being adopted. But I was so excited. I was finally going to have a sister. And this is how it was posed to me. And she moved into where his office was. And then he lost his office and was just in the main bedroom with my mom. And there was tons of drama there. This girl was insane. She was doing every form of rule breaking, every possible thing that I knew if I even thought of doing something like that, I would be dead. And she didn't seem to care. It didn't matter to her. And it was out of control to the point where I know she got kicked out of the house, and I wasn't talked to about it. I don't know how long she lasted there, but it wasn't very long before she got kicked out. And then everything spiraled, where this guy was on the top of the world in terms of his career. Prestigious, had the full bar in his office and the fancy corner, suite in the Walgreens headquarters, all of those fancy box tickets and all the things that come with that, to this guy being sent over and over again by his company to rehab to quote unquote dry out, which is a term that they used back then. We just need to get him to dry out. And it wasn't sticking. It wasn't sticking. And eventually, he lost that job. But there's a pivotal thing that happened with this guy, as in a way, as benign as this part of the story is in comparison to everything else that you're going to hear in chapters that are coming. There is something that occurred that is so wild that absolutely made it crystal clear in my mind and in my body that nothing mattered more than whatever man was in my mom's life. Like nothing, not even the life of her own daughter. One of the perks my mom saw in this guy, is that he was a country club guy. Of course he was, the corporate guy with the, golfed all the time and that whole scene. And the country club was fun for me. There was a lot of like kid activities where these rich parents would, have their kids at the country club, and they would be kept busy while the parents did things like golf and tennis and drank, quite frankly. And it felt kind of fun to dress up and be around other people. And it was a club. It was secret. Not everyone could go there. I knew even in school and among my friends that there were very few of us who belonged to a country club. So that just made us even more prestigious and more fancy pants and more mysterious, I guess you could say, and more privileged to other people that were there. And on top of it, this guy also drove, he was very flashy. Again, the opposite of my father. And he had like a really fancy BMW, which at the time, it wasn't like BMWs were everywhere like they are now. Like BMW was considered like still kind of exotic. And then he got a DeLorean. And those of you who remember the DeLoreans from like the movie Back to the Future, I mean, that was insane to have one of those. I mean, talk about attention. That's having more attention than having like a Ferrari. I was driven to school in a fucking DeLorean. You can imagine the reaction from teachers, and you're just treated differently. And part of me kind of liked it because I was treated differently, meaning my ass got kind of kissed. But then there was also a part of me that knew you guys have no idea of the price that I'm having to pay in order to have all these shiny things that everyone's so impressed by. This comes with this comes with a big price tag, and I would trade it for everything. And we were at the country club. My mom was probably working. Okay. My mom always worked through all of this. Another thing about my mom that I'll give her credit for, this woman did teach me to never depend on a man, never depend on an institution, never even to depend on a particular company or a particular client for your financial security and well being. This woman was not a gold digger. She was not looking for a man to save her or rescue her or pay for her. Um, that was not her thing. She liked that everyone knew that she was self made, and that just made her even more impressive. Like the accolades she got from that and the attention she got from that were very much worth it because that made her even more unusual. Again, back then, it's not as unusual now, of course, but back then, this was not really a thing. Okay. Especially in the Midwest. And I was at the country club with him alone. I was probably put in whatever their area is for kids while he was playing 18 holes of golf. And I remember that he came to get me to leave and he was wasted. I mean, annihilated enough to where I knew that. And I have to say, I'm pretty sure I was about 8 or 9 years old. And I knew that he was insanely drunk. And I knew that there was no way he could drive me. But I also knew that there was no one I could tell, that it wouldn't have been safe to tell. In fact, that I'd get in trouble to tell. So I had to figure it out on my own. And we got to the car. I got his keys. He had a diesel BMW. It was a stick shift. And somehow got him into the passenger side. He was, I mean, I'm talking passing out drunk. I didn't have a cell phone because those didn't exist at that time. What was I going to do? Call my mother from a payphone? That was not safe. That was not an option. I knew I had to get us home. And I somehow, which is by the grace of God, I drove us home in a stick shift at 8 or 9 years old. Now, lucky for me, I've always been on the high percentile for height. So I was more of a height of probably like an eighth grader, like a 13-year-old, even at that age, which is why I was even able to reach the pedals. How I knew and was able to get us home, it wasn't like a far drive. And thankfully, it wasn't like a freeway was involved. There were just like, I think, two roads I had to get on, but I got us home. I didn't do very well at getting us in the garage, but I got us home. And nothing was ever said about it. Nothing was said to me about it. I wasn't talked to about it. I would like to think he got in trouble, but I never heard about it. I knew this was not normal. I knew this was crazy. And what that taught me is like I'm here fighting for myself. I'm here on my own. I have no one I can talk to about this. I can't tell my father. I can't tell anyone. And there becomes another secret. Then, not too long after that, I had a birthday party at my house. My mom was very, very sick, and she asked him to be able to drive like my four, like it was like four girlfriends home, like from having the birthday party at my house. And I remember these four girls were fighting in the car of who would get dropped off first because they knew he was drunk. They knew he wasn't right. They wanted out of the car and they were fighting over, no, I live closer. I need to be dropped off first. I have to get home. I have to be dropped off first. And I was so uncomfortable and I was so powerless and I felt like I couldn't do anything and I was embarrassed. And again, by the grace of God, we did end up back home in one piece. And that I remember my mom, that was a last straw for my mom. That's when she was finally done with this guy or done soon after. And that made me feel like, okay, like maybe she does give a shit about me. Maybe she does value my life. Maybe now it's going to just be me and my mom and not all these guys and not another person she marries. It's just going to be her and I. Things are going to be different now because that's what I had to believe. I had to hope for that. Why wouldn't I hope for that? But that was the furthest from the truth. It only got worse from here. It only became a nightmare from here. In fact, that was just the tip of it all. And here I thought this was the end. This was the end of her doing all this. She's going to realize none of this is worth it and that I'm more than enough for her. Because right after he was gone, I became her main form of supply again. And when that happens with a narcissist, again, you're the shiny object and you feel like the golden goose. You feel like the prize. It's the best fucking feeling in the world. My mom was taking me to plays. We'd go to the movies. We'd go to TGIF Friday. She even let me have chicken fingers and French fries sometimes. We would go swimming. We would go shopping. Um, my mom would even sit sometimes on the floor with me when I would build Legos. She even did like pedicure nights on a Friday night with me. And I really thought and I felt safe. Like, this is so great, like I have my mom, like, all of that is over. All of that is behind us. And as soon as you feel like you've got that and you feel safe and you can sink into that with a narcissist, that's when all the fucking lights go off and you're completely discarded and you are ripped away. You're thrown away like 5-day-old meat without any possible warning. And that's exactly what happened next. I feel this is the perfect spot to end this chapter. Again, please take a screenshot of the episode, share it on your Instagram, Facebook stories, or in TikTok. Tag me at ProjectME with Tiffany. Comment over on ProjectME TV on YouTube. Subscribe. Leave a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. Tap the 5 stars on Spotify. Let me know that you do want to hear chapter 3 of the series. If I don't get enough response, I'm going to take it as that this is as far as the chapters are supposed to go in this format, in this public way. And as long as I know that this is resonating, this is interesting, this is cathartic, this is validating, this is helpful, this is healing in some way, I will continue to be this vulnerable, be this raw, and share this mind-blowing story. And what is about to unfold from here will be things that you never want to imagine would happen to a little girl. If you enjoyed this podcast, please write a 5-star review on iTunes. Not only will this make me super happy, but it will allow more listeners to find our special show. Simply help me help others.